Welcome, welcome everyone. Welcome to the NASBE webinar. Hopefully you're in the right place. Our webinar today is entitled Leveraging Apprenticeships to Rebuild the Educator Workforce, Lessons from the Great State of Delaware. It's going to be an exciting webinar. We'll give folks another minute to join. I hope wherever you are, you're having a great start to the month of March. In Ohio, where I am, March 1st is Statehood Day. So we were founded in 1803. So we'd like to celebrate on March 1st. If you're a mathematician, perhaps you'll be celebrating Pi Day on the 14th. Always a good time. I make a pretty mean chocolate peanut butter pie, if I do say so myself. If you're suspicious, then stay off the streets on the Ides of March, March 15th, because that does not bode well. Maybe that only applies to dictators or what have you, but best to beware the Ides of March, right? Anyway, great. So let's get started. Welcome, welcome once again. My name is Paulo Di Maria. I am the president and CEO of the National Association of State Boards of Education. I always say that very deliberately because state boards of education are those bodies at the state level that are typically involved in amplifying and fleshing out legislation on any number of areas that need a sort of nonpartisan authority to kind of get into the details. As I said, I'm the president of the National Association of State Boards of Education. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization, and the only association focused solely on supporting citizen leaders who serve on state boards of education. And without a doubt, all the board members that I interact with, they are solely focused on helping every student to be successful and creating excellent education systems in their respective states. And we help support them through publications, through conferences, through networks, technical assistance, advocacy, and things like this very webinar. Let me start with a few logistics. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be distributed. So look for that in your mailboxes. We have enabled closed captioning, so if you need to use that, feel free to do so. We ask that if you have questions to use the Q&A function. That is typically found if you're on a screen like mine, you can push the More button and you'll see Q&A as one of the options under the More button. We also will be using the chat. Our presenters and our staff will be putting things into the chat that have relevancy to today's presentation. We also welcome you, our viewers, to add things to the chat that you might think are relevant. And why don't we actually start by asking you to put your name in the chat, your affiliation, and maybe a few words about why you've decided to spend your time with us, for which I am greatly appreciative. Let me say a few words about the context for this presentation. Many boards of education have a responsibility for teacher licensure and certification. So they are tuned into not only the technicalities of what is it required in order to become a teacher in their respective states, but also in the supply and demand issues. And so we routinely hear from our members that they are hearing about shortages, that they hear from their district superintendents and others about shortages. Sometimes those are in certain subject areas, sometimes they're geographic, and they are continually on the lookout for ways to address some of those issues, meet the demand, and address any challenges that might exist in their teacher workforces. Teachers, as we all know, are so very essential to the success of every education system and to the success of every student. Now, we're hearing all this talk about AI and technology, and yet the research is really clear that that personal interaction between a student and a teacher is still the most important contributor to student success outside the family. And so teaching is really, really important, and it's something that our members care about. So we're always on the lookout for innovative activities that address these issues. In other words, that help deal with some of the supply and demand issues, but that also reflect smart and rigorous approaches to preparing people to be in the classroom. Typically we think of traditional routes through colleges of education and degree programs, but we're seeing a lot of emergence of different alternative routes, and you're going to hear about some of those today. Ultimately, our members really want to understand what leading states are doing, and so that's why we're here, and we're happy to be presenting the Delaware story. So we have three amazing public servants who are on the staff at the Delaware Department of Education. Keeley Powell is the Associate Secretary of Education for Educator Excellence. So she really is the leader who oversees Delaware's work in the entire scope of educator, all the educator-related activities. And Hlabangana-Clay is the Education Associate for Educator Equity and Recruitment. And Katherine Burns, Katie Burns, is the Education Associate of Early Engagement and Teacher Career Ladders. They're going to talk you through what amazing things they're doing in Delaware around apprenticeships, leveraging paraprofessionals, a whole host of things that are all kind of strategically pulled together and aligned in the interest of addressing and making sure that every student in Delaware has an amazing teacher in every classroom every day. With that, Keeley, I think I'm going to turn it over to you to get us started.
Thank you. Okay. Hey, welcome. It is our pleasure to join you this afternoon to talk to you about the wonderful work we're doing for the state of Delaware in the area of stacking and scaling educator apprenticeships in Delaware. Our goal is to bring more people into the education profession with more flexible pathways. So we were just introduced. We're your presenters for today. I'm going to start off by giving you some context about our team and about Delaware and about the work that's being done. First, I want to talk about the team that I lead. I lead the Educator Excellence team, the Delaware Department of Education. The Department of Education actually has hundreds of employees, but I specifically lead a team that supports growing educators from early engagement through school leadership. So today you have three members of our team here, but our team actually does everything from early engagement for pre-service educators as early as high school, through recruitment of educators into the profession, preparation, working with our higher education partners, induction, our mentoring program, feedback through our teacher and leader evaluation system, teacher leadership, and school leadership. All of that is supported by the Educator Excellence team in the state of Delaware. Today, we're specifically talking about apprenticeships. So in this work that we do in the state of Delaware, we have several partners that we've had. We're working with the Delaware Department of Labor. We are working with our legislators. We'll talk about what legislation has enabled this work. We are working with National Center for Grow Your Own. We are working with the Rodell Foundation and RTI International. So I talked about this work that we're doing with apprenticeships and how we've been able to do it. There's actually been two relatively recent pieces of legislation in the state of Delaware that have enabled this work. First, just quickly, we have House Bill 430. This is one that enabled us to create these grow your own programs, where we are taking people from being a paraprofessional in the school into being a full licensed educator and supporting them financially. And the other one, which you'll hear more about, HB 138, which established the teacher apprenticeship programs that we will go into detail with during this presentation. We're very happy to have this support from our legislators and to have these in place. But in our work, we've realized that there are some things that we need from our state to support scaling these programs up. You'll hear about year-long teacher residency, which is supported by state funds that pays people to do student teaching for a full year. Typically, when you're a college student becoming a teacher, you do student teaching for one semester, about 12 to 14 weeks. We know that having someone in the classroom for longer before they become that teacher of record is better for the students and it's better for the future educator. So we support year-long teacher residency. That program has been so successful in Delaware that it's grown beyond our budget. So that's something that we're keeping an eye to. We're also looking for additional funding for mentors for our teacher apprentices. We're looking for additional sustainable funding to increase capacity statewide. And we also know that we have a lot of need in the state of Delaware, and I bet some of you can relate to this in your states, for secondary and special education pathway opportunities that meet the apprenticeship model. We have partnerships with educator preparation programs for apprenticeships, but we are still working to see which of those universities and colleges and programs can help us produce more secondary and special ed teachers because we really, really need them. The demand is high. So just a little bit on how we're stacking apprenticeships. We've had a lot of coverage in the media, and locally and some nationally, and presentations at conferences. So we just wanted to show some of the things that we've been doing. We're very proud of that work. And I'm just going to show, I guess, touch a little bit on all of the ways that a person can move through our pathways into teacher education. So, quick overview, there are 5 steps that someone could go through from the beginning to end. Our teacher academy programs live within our high schools, and they provide students with hands-on learning experiences, and they support them as future education professionals while they're still in high school. This is offered throughout the state of Delaware in high schools through career and technical education. The next option for a young person who's coming out of high school, if you are a paraprofessional, you can do a youth registered apprenticeship, which is a low or no cost pathway that leads ultimately to teacher certification. In this program, someone who's a paraprofessional would work full time while completing a degree in a teaching area. It is open to people in teacher academy. So we can have people enter this program as early as high school and complete their degree through this program. We are piloting that this year. We also have the paraprofessional registered occupation. That is for 18-year-olds who have passed the parapro exam. They also have this to be a low or no cost pathway into teaching certification. We are piloting that in the upcoming academic year and will have it available statewide 2 years from now. Another one that we have available is the teacher apprenticeship program, which is the Grow Your Own Parent Teacher programs. This allows employees who are employed by school districts, either as paraprofessionals or in other positions, a low or no cost pathway to go into a teaching career. So you work as a paraprofessional full time and while you're going through the program, and then you end the program as a year-long teacher resident receiving a stipend from the state. This is available to people in Delaware who have an associate's degree or 60 college credits if they are in a school district that's participating in the program. Finally, year-long teacher residency, which I previously mentioned, has some state funding that provides a stipend to people who are doing student teaching for a year. So our goal in all of this is to allow people to become educators with little to no debt, with support and partnership with our LEAs and with the state. So that's a big thing with us, is that we want to get people who are either new to the profession or career changers to get in our classrooms in front of our students with little to no debt. Yes, thank you. So just additional pre-service pipeline entry points. We talked about teacher academy, youth registered apprenticeships, paraprofessional, registered occupation. All of those feed into our educator preparation programs and different programs, which you see in the middle. All of those programs end with a year-long clinical experience as a teacher resident in the state of Delaware. And we currently fund stipends for people to be in those programs. I am now going to turn it over to Katie Burns to talk about our youth registered pre-apprenticeship program.
Thank you, Keeley. Hello, everyone. So I'm really excited to talk about our first couple of on-ramps into our teacher apprenticeship pipeline. So we think of this as an opportunity to provide our wonderful completers in the CTE pathway called Teacher Academy to kind of get them their feet wet in apprenticeship, to give themselves a head start as they are thinking about, how do I become a teacher, and what can I do today to set myself up for success when I graduate. And so they're going to earn 225 of their work-based learning hours, giving them some of those experiences ahead of time that they would originally be starting after graduation when they're hired on as a full-time employee. In addition, they're going to check off those competencies and a couple of their credits, allowing them to start ahead of the game. When you are being hired in your first full-time position, allowing them a little bit more flexibility helps with retention as well. So as I mentioned, they're graduating with between 12 and 19 credits. depending on which of our four-year institutions they decide to go to based on their education pathway and also which district they're in, because each of them offers slightly different dual enrollment opportunities for their high school students. I personally support each of the LEAs as they work through their selections process to make sure that they are choosing candidates that represent what we're hoping to build and cultivate in the state, what the district is looking for, and that they feel supported throughout the whole process. And what that rolls into, as I mentioned, is the paraprofessional registered occupation, which I'll be calling pro because that's a lot to repeat over and over again. So pro is our first full apprenticeship in the pipeline. And it kind of has two profiles of candidates who could take part in this program. And first are those Teacher Academy graduates. Once they graduate their junior year, they're actually taking the Para-Pro exam as a part of the curriculum rewrite that just completed. And so as long as they pass that, and they're graduating from high school, they are then eligible to be hired as a paraprofessional for that first year. They're going to work full time in that job. And they'll earn traditional benefits and the pay rates that are matching with the district's pay rates for paraprofessionals. The second candidate profile is our existing paraprofessionals. And that candidate, you're looking for someone who has under 60 credits towards an education pathway. So 60 of the right credits, so to speak. And they want to become a teacher. And so this is an opportunity for them to finish out that associate's degree or get started on it if they haven't done so before. And so it allows you to develop those people who are in the building that already know your students and your admin and your culture, and develop them into teachers based on their area of interest. And it's, you've already interviewed them, you know them, they're hired in the building already. So for them, they're going to work full time during the day, as I mentioned, and then this is the tricky part. In the evening, they're going to take night and asynchronous classes at the college of their choosing. So we currently have two educator preparation programs that work with the apprenticeship model, and they will choose the program that fits which area of education they're interested in. Are you elementary education? Are you secondary? Are you interested in special ed? You're going to make a call based on those different selection criteria. They have to complete those 60 credits, their associate's degree within 2 years. So just keep in mind that our point in getting you into the funnel at whichever point makes the most sense for where you currently stand, it is that you have a kind of a time frame to complete them in, and we want you to roll into the next one. The goal with all of this would be completing your time as an apprentice within 4 years total, once you transition through K-12/grow your own. So as I mentioned, the goal is for them to not finish this pipeline once they complete their associate's degree. They would then move on to finish their bachelor's degree and seek certification. What does recruitment look like? So we make sure that they know how many spots they have allocated. The biggest consideration here for us when we're thinking about pro and growing how many paraprofessionals we have in the state is making sure that we can pay to get them through the entire pipeline. I want sustainable funding, and I want to make sure that we can provide those spots. So we give them an allocation for those districts who are interested in growing the paraprofessional registered occupation. We provide onboarding and selections criteria and expectations. We support with in-person recruitment events that I tailor to that population. And then for our Teacher Academy students and our youth registered apprenticeship program in particular, I provide an in-person or a virtual parent and family session. Because we want to make sure that they're getting firsthand information about their student as they are moving into this opportunity. How do we fund it? So we currently for Pro are using WIOA funds, which is workforce funding. And this covers all tuition and fees for the candidate. Currently, they also have $1,000 of support funding per candidate, and this can cover a very wide variety of things to support the candidates in completing their coursework. That could be books and supplies. It could be a laptop. It's based on need. And at the discretion of like the candidate and a conversation with the Department of Labor. Last but not least, this is our pilot year for this program. So we were really excited to have two districts start with us. They both took very different pathways on which candidates they were focusing on recruiting, which I think speaks a lot to district character and you know who they're looking to develop at this time as their strategy for the year. But we are currently working with Appleconnemic and Seaford, and we're very excited to have our signing day in the fall to welcome new candidates to the program. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Anne Hlabangana-Clay.
All right, thank you, Katie. So where we stack next, if you think of it as stair steps or boxes on top of each other, is this K-12 teacher apprenticeship. And as Keeley highlighted earlier, House Bill 156 actually, excuse me, 138 actually set that foundation for us in 2023, where Governor Carney signed it into legislation with the strong support of State Representative Kim Williams. And that allowed for us to develop the model that we'll see next. All right. So as you can see, there are lots of components to this model, but the highlights here are, of course, that it's an earn while you learn pathway. It begins with those being employed already, either currently or the LEA must take them on as an employee, as a paraprofessional apprentice. They hold the associate's degree or 60 credits working full-time within their LEA while they are earning and learning. So that's a lot, but it's exciting. And then they move into a supervised classroom where they're practicing alongside a high quality cooperating teacher. Those responsibilities gradually increase over that residency, as Keeley shared earlier, year with ongoing coaching and feedback and building on their experiences. Our recruiting process is different than Katie's. We were very fortunate to be able to cast a net across the entire state of paraprofessionals a couple years ago, and we learned that 1,029 of them were interested in becoming a teacher in the future. And some of them shared, we asked questions such as, is it something that you're interested in doing now? Is it something that you're interested in doing, you know, in the future, meaning 5 years from now? We asked certain questions around what were they interested in elementary, were they interested in secondary, right? Trying to really hone in on what their interest levels were. What we found across all of the respondents is that they were very much interested in working and serving students, right? Which is what everything, all this work that we're talking about is about. So we're excited about that. So the selection of candidates is that they must be an employee of a Delaware local agency, education agency. They also need to be recommended by either a building administrator, a district administrator, or an educator prep program. So some are currently in an education, excuse me, can't get it out, educator prep program. And those who work with them are saying, hey, they're doing amazing work in education or maybe a different field, right? And they have the credits and we think they'd be a great candidate. And then, of course, as I said earlier, those 60 credits or associate's degree are their on-ramp. So our funding is multifaceted. So we were fortunate to work with the U.S. Department of Labor to secure a non-competitive state apprenticeship expansion formula grant, which we are still being able to receive those funds at this time. And then also our state partnership has been the biggest piece is with our Delaware Department of Labor, where we've also been able to secure funding for all of our apprentices, whether they're Katie's or mine. We're excited with that partnership. And the statewide impact, of course, is that it's addressing the teacher shortages. It builds our local talent here in Delaware and aligns education and workforce needs. This is just a little snapshot of some of the first cohort of apprentices that are now in the classroom. Oh my goodness, they've all graduated and have been hired into our Delaware LEAs. And so that's them on the very top left corner. Was the signing day in 2023, and there's their graduation on the far right. So it's super exciting. And then we have the opportunity to get cohort number 2 of apprenticeship into the works. There are 26 of them total. And on the left there is actually one of our cohort 1 apprentices. After her graduation, she came on back and she gave a speech to our next cohort. So it was just an absolute delight. And then on the right is our announcement about our actual signing day last spring. Katie and I are fortunate we're going to do our signing day together this year. So all of our upcoming apprentices will sign on the same day with the Department of Labor. This is just another snapshot of some of the work. So we have apprentices. There's a grow your own, right? Parateacher, there are about 88 of them. But for our apprentices who are registered with the Department of Labor, you can see that we've had in the K-12 world a growth over time. And so super excited about the work that will continue to scale across Delaware. All right, Katie.
All right, back to me. So, the important piece to know is that a lot of these apprenticeship opportunities and making sure that we are able to provide consistent experiences come down to creating systems around apprenticeship as a state agency. But first, it would not be possible without our partners, our LEA partners who all have apprentices or residents in the work. And so this is just a visual representation. We have 19 school districts and 23 charter schools in the state, giving us 42, and we would love to be in all of them. And here's where we are today as we are beginning that scaling opportunity. So, as I mentioned, we're taking a systematic approach to building the structures around apprenticeship. And our goal is for this to be have longevity and consistency. Apprenticeship is new in the state. It is 3 years old this year, and we are growing as rapidly as we can while also maintaining that quality. And so here's what we're doing to make sure that this is consistent and makes sense. And so first, we're making sure that our candidates are registered in a consistent way. And so we created a full registration process to manage personally identifiable information. We made sure that those students are all registered in the appropriate federal databases to make sure that payment is processed in a timely manner for their tuition, and that not only do we have the information we need to manage our candidates, but also that information is communicated in a way that makes sense for our educator preparation programs, for our LEAs who have candidates in these programs, and that we can provide support in a more timely manner for them should any issues arise, because life happens. Additionally, this is a huge undertaking for us this year. We sat down with all of our players for apprenticeship and created a consistent timeline that allows us to say, hey, if you want to start in the fall, here's when we need you to make selections. This is what the process is going to look like for you. And at the bottom, here's the documents you need. And here's the financial aid you should consider applying for. This creates a really streamlined process, and since all of our funding deadlines, our educator preparation program application deadlines are included, as well as giving us some time to recruit and visit in person, this allows us to share this with all different levels, whether that is incoming apprentices, higher ed institutions, or just people within the department who want to make sure that they have an idea of what time frame we're looking at. And this is a big component, and as we are a part of a nationwide conversation around mentoring for apprentices. And so if you're hearing some things from the U.S. Department of Education, this is a larger conversation. But what we want to make sure is that mentoring for our apprenticeship candidates, no matter where they are in the pipeline, has a very consistent process, that we are training our mentors, that they have the compensation and the understanding of what this role is going to look like for them, and that our candidates have the support that they need as they're working through the apprenticeship model. And so we're working with our comprehensive center to develop this training, and we'll have some in-person opportunities as well as some virtual ones. With some short modular training components to make sure that we are providing touch points kind of for support. And so really looking at also braiding compensation for this and what makes the most sense, given that we have a range within our LEAs on what is possible, but also with size and demographics. So just making sure that we're supporting this consistently throughout the state. And last but not least is the big question that everyone loves. And so setting up systems around data and reporting is really important. We all want to know how it's going, right? And so who needs to own it? What do we need? Who needs to own it? And then where do we keep it, right? And how do we format it without taking up a lot of extra time in everyone's day trying to manually input data? And so charting those requirements, brainstorming our desired fields, discussing platform usage, and what already exists, what resources can we already tap into, and then really thinking about qualitative data in a meaningful way, since we have so many stakeholder groups engaged in the work. And so comprehensively, that's a system that we are building at the Department of Education to support apprenticeship. But I know there's some questions that we need to address. Let me pull up Q&A.
Yeah, and I can help. I can help you curate those too.
Sounds great.
Although maybe we could transition into sort of the discussion, and then I can just insert those as makes sense, if that makes sense to you all.
Sure.
So I want to, first of all, kudos to you all for, I think, having so well thought out all the different aspects. And I want to make sure, because one of the challenges I always have when there are multiple kind of programs is making sure I make sense of them. It looks like you're targeting different groups of people. Your high school students, right? Those start, and I think that's where the Teacher Academy comes into play, as well as the youth registered apprenticeship. Am I understanding that correctly? And then the paraprofessional registered occupation is also sort of a high school target. I'm understanding that correctly as well?
So your high school students can roll from the pre-apprenticeship opportunity directly into pro, but it also allows for us to use existing paraprofessionals for pro as well.
Got it. Got it.
It's essentially anyone who has under 60 credits towards an education pathway.
Right, right. But then if I'm a parapro that has 60 credits, then that's where some of the higher level apprenticeship approaches kick in, right? Is that correct?
That is correct. That's where the K-12 kicks in.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I want to clarify a little bit about the selection are the numbers that you have, and again, you did a really nice job of presenting this, but are those controlled by how much money you have available, or are you just trying to not move too quickly? Do you see there as greater demand than what you're able to actually approve?
That's a great question. So are you referring to those who are moving from the high school pathway or those who already have their 60 credits?
Maybe, but wherever, because you talked about a selection process pretty deliberately, and I was trying to figure out, is that weeding, is that like weeding out some people, or do you find yourself making decisions where you've got like 20 people who want to do it, and you're only going to select 10? Or maybe you don't, and it's really up to the districts to sort of recruit people into the different programs.
So what I will say is, Anne and I are not, what we like to say is we are here to support you in selecting the best fits for your apprentices. And so you want, at the end of the day, to select someone as an apprentice who you want to hire as a teacher. And the people who know that best are you and the admin who get to see those professionals. And so uh, I'll give an example and then I'll pass it over to Anne. But for Pro, as you saw, almost 80% of paraprofessionals in the state are interested in becoming a teacher. And so
Yes.
I do not, it would not make sense to go from 0 to 1,000 apprentices in the first year. But also we want to make sure at the end of the day that our apprentices are ending up in a spot. Right. So if I have 1,000 people who go through and say, I want to become an elementary educator in District A, there might not be 1,000 spots open for that person, right?
Yeah.
So we want the district to also take a look at what their need is so that
Right.
when they are selecting candidates, it might not be 25, it might be four, because you know what your projected need is within 3 to 4 years, right? In those
Yeah.
areas.
Yeah.
And so I will say I'm doing those. I just finished my tour around the state to help with recruitment for Pro. And all of my sessions had almost double the number of spots that the district and I had discussed as being provided for the next academic year. And that's making sure that we have that capacity. Because if you're investing up to 4 years in that candidate and working
Yeah.
through this process, you want to hire them. You don't want them to leave you. You want them to stay with you. And so for me, it's a couple of things. It's A, making sure that that capacity is there, but also making sure that I can fund you through the entire piece of the pipeline as well, too, right? It would not be sustainable to make sure that I can pay for you for this year, but maybe not next. That's not fair to that candidate as well.
That's really great. That's a great character. So it means like you've got really good demand for this program. So the prospects are really good as you move forward. But it also reminds me that it's very critical the partnership with the district. And then again, every district is of a different size. So some may be looking for 20 folks, others may only need three, and they have to size what they do to the shortage that they or the demand that they have. Talk about how this, you mentioned, made passing reference to your Grow Your Own program, and even though this is not about that, I'd be curious to know how does the Grow Your Own interface with this?
Well, I'm glad you asked. So it's the exact same model, but it's actually funded by House Bill 430, as Keeley touched on in the beginning. So it has different
Yeah,
requirements for starting the program. It's through a grant, it's an RFP that the educator preparation programs apply for, and then they gather candidates from the LEA versus the apprenticeship work that we're talking about here is we go through the selection process that was shared, and the Department of Labor funds that. So it's just a different funding source. We have opportunities. We started it a little bit earlier, and because we have more funding, there's 4 million that is attached to that annually. We have more candidates that have gone through the program and are now in schools and are in the pipeline. So I think currently we have either completed and or in the pipeline 88 grow your own candidates.
excellent, excellent.
Yeah.
Say a little bit more about high school enrollment in the Teacher Academy. I mean, do you see, a good amount of interest among high school students to becoming teachers? Are your numbers increasing in that regard?
So as far as our CTE pathways, students have to take at least 2 credits of CTE in the same pathway as a part of their high school experience.
All students in Delaware.
Yes, but
Got it. Nice.
what we look at for that is actually not just all of them. We look at what we call completers. And so you're
Right.
looking at people who have been in this program for a while, and that's who I target to have conversations with about this opportunity early. So we're actually speaking to sophomores and juniors to say, hey, if this is something that you're really interested in, and you know you want to become a teacher, it's not every high school student that knows at
Right.
14 or 15, right? That they want what they want to do with their lives. But the ones that do, I want them to know that this is an option because it was not an option when I was becoming a teacher.
Nice, nice. So, one of the questions in the Q&A is, like, are you tracking graduates from these different pathways for, to gauge success, right? Are these preparation programs really leading to successful classroom teachers? Say a little bit about that.
And do you
I
want
was
to
going to
jump in
say,
first?
Keely, are you able to jump in with the ed prep side? Are they tracking data? Are they going to be tracking data?
So we do track data on all of our educator preparation program graduates. The two programs that we're discussing here are relatively new.
Right.
Those ed prep reports every 2 years. So the data that was collected on the reports that are out now definitely would not have the information about the youth registered apprenticeships at all. The grow your own candidates are actually merged in with all of our ed prep report data. We could probably have our data analysts flesh out specifically the by candidate name or ID number, the ones who did the grow your own pathway. So I would say this, the program that Katie's doing is too new
Yeah.
able to give me that data. And we already have some completers on the program that Ann leads, and we could
Yeah.
go out and compare.
And the numbers are small enough that you could like just keep in touch with people for some period of time to kind of get how they're how they're fitting in, right?
So we do that anyway across the board with our
Yep.
program completers and ed prep. These programs are relatively new, so we just didn't separate those out. But we do have we track data over time for that.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Talk a little bit about, usually a lot of times our members will ask questions about like, these sound great. What bumps in the road did you hit? What were some of the key challenges that you've had in terms of implementation or just getting people's attention that, hey, here's some new pathways that might be a good fit for you.
Well, I'll tell you what, I must say that as far as the candidates and those who are participating and those who are interested, like it caught on with wildfire, really.
Nice.
So really
Nice.
the bumps in the road at the beginning were actually not, and they're not bumps, they were challenges, right? Was with our ed prep programs, right? So to think about how I see there's a question in there about the para salaries, et cetera, did they get
Yes.
increased? But from our end, what we do from the department is take care of the tuition. So that is taking care, that's a huge lift for those paras, and they receive their full-time salary. An LEA might add on to it if that's their choice, but that's what happens currently. But in order for it to work, the ed prep programs had to reduce their cost, right? We can't pay
Yeah.
the full tuition for a person who's going through well, we can't, and then obviously scale. And so that was a bump in the road, but they were willing to hear from other ed prep programs in the nation. So we actually brought in some of our partners that you saw on slide 2 or 3, helped us to bring in some national perspectives so
Nice.
that our deans from each of our ed prep programs heard the messaging of what has worked. And we're not taking seats from people that, weren't in them
Right.
anyway, right? These
Right.
are seats that were probably vacant. And anyway, once we got over that, it really, like I said, everybody wants to do it, right? Katie, did
Yeah.
you want to add anything?
I will say that I think the biggest challenge I run into with Pro is actually that there's a lot of interest in the program, and it's making sure that we are thinking through a lot of those factors that we discussed around making sure that you have the time to assess need and look at what kind of candidates, what kind of teachers you have as opportunities, and forward projecting before we begin the onboarding process.
Yeah, I'd like to see increased compatibility of these programs with secondary education. That's so much of our need is in that area. And we have done an amazing job of articulating these programs with our flexible elementary education and sometimes special education as well. But secondary ed, it's been a little bit more difficult.
Interesting,
Our
interesting.
efforts on that.
Because of the specialization in the subject areas and that kind of thing?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. Do you have any, and again, what I love about the people that do the work you do is you're constantly on the lookout for that next creative, innovative opportunity. Are you planning on trying to find some ways or just leverage these programs and maybe market them in a particular way to get at that issue of secondary?
Well, we actually did identify a provider, and Ann can tell you more about that. That's giving us some flexibility.
Nice, nice.
Yeah,
We
so
don't have to
we
get into too much
actually,
detail,
oh,
but go ahead.
sorry, Paolo. We actually vetted a CAPE approved secondary program, Northern State University. And so they're piloting with one of our LEAs now and are wanting to expand through there. But that was one of our ways of being able to provide that preparation. It's obviously an online model, and we do the work here in Delaware to secure that partnership. But it we're getting there in Delaware, but in the meantime, we felt the urgency, and so we
Yeah,
reached out to
yeah.
other partners. Yeah.
I want to go back to again. Kathleen raises a couple questions about paraprofessionals, right? The one is really about paraprofessional salaries. This is a little bit, removed from this discussion, but it's a fair one, right? Because there are going to be those students, even if they're coming out of high school and they land in a paraprofessional slot and they really enjoy that, and they may not have a desire to get a bachelor's degree or what have you. Are there any things going on in Delaware to really elevate the value of paraprofessionals, and then sort of related to that is in terms of the salaries?
So, a couple things that I'll say here is first, as a part of the apprenticeship model, there has to be a pay increase every year that they are a part of each of our different pieces of the pathway. So they do receive an increase in a pay scale like a normal paraprofessional would every year that they are a part of the apprenticeship. And so 2 years for pro, potentially 2 years as well for K-12. So each year they'll have a little bit of growth there. Um, but what I will say is that this, I think, shines a really bright light on paraprofessionals and about how wonderful that experience
Yeah,
is in preparing people to become teachers, right? And so, your high school graduates, they might not have considered that paraprofessional occupation as a stepping stone into teaching, and how great that experience can be when it comes to gaining experience in classroom management. I served as a paraprofessional while I was working on becoming a teacher, and
nice.
I can say that knowing how to handle classroom behaviors on an experience level from 4 years as a para really set me ahead, and I felt really supported from that. And I like to talk about it as I've done this. It just didn't exist as a pathway. But what I like to also say is while we don't want people to exit our pipeline once they've gotten on, if they decide, hey, I actually don't know if I want to finish becoming a teacher, which again, that's not our goal. Our goal is for them to end up as a certified teacher in that pathway, right? But if they decide to exit, they absolutely can to stay in that role. But making sure that they know that this is an option and that they're going to have that growth and that experience is an important part of the apprenticeship model.
Nice, nice.
I was just going to
Um,
add, Paolo,
yeah,
I
go
was
ahead.
going to add in that Senate Bill 156 in 2023, I do believe was, there's been several, but that encourages an experienced paraprofessional to become a full-time certified teacher. And so their salary scale will increase. They'll receive 1 year of service credit on the teacher's salary scale for every 2 years that they served as a paraprofessional once they become a teacher. But also, as Katie was saying, right, if they are a paraprofessional currently, we do value in our K-12, and I think also in Katie's pro program for the ed prep programs, to give them those years and or credits for experience. So they've served as a paraprofessional, let's say 5 years, right? That goes towards their credits, right, in place of coursework or things of that nature. And so again, I think Delaware is doing several things. One more, I don't want to take away the time, but this is exciting. If you've been following us, we have been increasing salaries for teachers and all educators for the last few years. And again, there will be another salary increase coming for the entire workforce in education. And so paraprofessionals, of course, will get a nice salary bump again. So I just wanted to share that.
Nice, nice. Great, great. Another question, this one coming from Tom, goes back to your mentoring slide, right? How do you ensure that the teachers that are serving as mentors, the high quality teachers, that they're really the ones best skilled to, help those new teachers or apprentices navigate, the realities of being a classroom teacher? Is there a selection process? Are they paid extra for doing that role? Say a little bit more about that role.
Sure. So what we are it's still in development. So full disclosure, none of this is finalized, but I'm happy to talk about the ideas that we have spoken
Excellent.
about
Yes.
as an apprenticeship governance team. So what we are looking at doing is allowing our building level admin to select mentors for those apprentices. Now, the Department of Labor has a requirement around here that says in any other apprenticeship model, you're going to work with someone who's in the field that you're going into, right? So you're not going to stick an HVAC person with a mechanic, right? And so for teaching, we would hope that your mentor would also be in elementary education if that's what you're going into, or in secondary education. So we would match you with someone who has the skills and the area of expertise that you're going into. We're going to provide a consistent training and onboarding, a community of practice to ensure those experiences, and a set of expectations for how to sign off on those competencies that are required as a part of apprenticeship for each of our candidates, so that everyone feels like they have a consistent experience going through mentoring, and an opportunity to provide feedback on that experience. We would love for them to receive the same level of compensation that someone would if you were going through a practicum and you're having an observation. And so there is additional compensation for those opportunities. And so we're looking to consistently match that, so that, no matter where you are, how you're going through this process, that you're being compensated for extra work for the extra time, in a fair manner, but also that that's a consistent experience for you.
Excellent, excellent. I want to remind all our viewers that if you have a question, please feel free to put it in the Q&A. I think we have answered most of the ones that have been placed there. Oh, I see one more just surfaced here. To what extent are you aligning teacher apprenticeships to address specific teacher shortages? I mean, in some respects, I think my takeaway from what you said is that the district is the key entry point for the apprentice, you're really leveraging district need to kind of get at whatever the shortage is. But is there perhaps something more strategic? Again, Keeley, you mentioned about, generally speaking, on the secondary side, are there other sort of state level strategic focus areas?
Great question. So we, of course, are always tracking data, but the LEA knows their needs, specifically from year to year. And so they are the ones to determine, actually, in Katie's case, 4 years they have to project out, right, what that vacancy might be. If they are starting with me, that's 2 years ahead. Either way, statewide, it's your all of your secondary, right? But particularly your math and your ELA are the big areas. We actually are just having conversations with our Delaware Department of Labor about registering another apprenticeship for our school psychologists and also another one for our school social workers, because those are also areas of need that Delaware historically has had. So the bottom line is at the state level, right, as we hear and we receive feedback via, you know, data reflections, et cetera, from our LEAs, we try to meet that with developing new registrations and, of course, asking for or advocating for funding where we can. But it really is LEA driven. It's LEA to LEA.
Excellent, excellent. Say a little bit more. One of the things I routinely ask anytime I'm talking about new programs is the role of the principal in the building, right? I mean, how important is it for a principal to really be tuned into what's happening with either the Grow Your Own, the apprenticeships, paras that might be in the program? Say a little bit about, are there things that you do to make sure that they have that knowledge base to help achieve the kind of success you want to see?
Yes, well, as Katie has said before, right, we're very hands-on with our communications, but when things, we try to be proactive in those through the governance meetings, right? That's at the district level, and then that gets carried down to the building level. But when there are challenges, per se, in the past, what we have done actually is taken a model from our strategic staffing work, where there are parameters in place for our residents. And so we use that conversation and guidance around what is best for those apprentices, right? And of course, what are your needs at the LEA? So that definitely goes to conversations with our building principals because they are the day in and day out, you know, with that particular apprentice. And we found that to be most valuable. Let's just remind ourselves of what they are. They're in print. Let's refer back to them as needed, and I think things have gone well.
I
Excellent.
also want to add here that when I'm doing recruitment for pro, I make it a point to also stop in and talk to administrators after, I have the conversation with our paraprofessionals who are interested or our teacher academy students. First, to get some face-to-face time because we don't always get to see them as frequently as we would like. But also to make sure that they feel like they have a person to talk to when they have questions. Not that the district staff is not wonderful and a great reference, but knowing that, I get to be the face of the program for the state in a lot of ways. So providing that in-person support while I'm there as well.
Nice, nice. Say a little bit more. The last question I'm going to give you is, what advice would you give the State Board of Education members? I mean, maybe you can reflect a little bit about on how the Delaware State Board has been involved in this work and supporting it. What advice would you give to state board members who want to kind of explore some of these avenues more deeply?
This work requires a lot of systems thinking. And so
Yeah,
um, there's just a lot of logistics that go into it, and a lot of that community building. And so I would honestly reach out to the organizations building it, and each state has different structures, right? Like,
right,
Anne
right,
and I have met with multiple states that, it might not be the state education agency that is the sponsor for the programs. It could be an EPP or the state union. And so we have had the support of our legislature, which is wonderful, allowing us to support this work.
right,
But the people who are developing the apprenticeships in your state are your best resource because they're the ones who are system thinking, but also would require the support in developing some of those
right,
systems.
right.
So that's my
Well, and
biggest.
I suppose you could also say if you don't see any innovation happening in your state, you could be the voice to kind of nudge people along, right? And say, hey, why aren't we thinking about Grow Your Own? Why aren't we thinking about apprenticeship programs? And maybe that's the stimulus that some people need to get things going. Very good. I'm going to share my screen again here just to make sure that people know that NASBE's got a number of related resources. As we said in the original slide, we publish a lot of information in advancement of our members' knowledge. And so you can use these QR codes to take a look at some of our latest publications that focus on teachers, teacher quality, teacher supply and demand, and so forth and so on, as well as different articles about apprenticeships, recruitments, pipelines. We also do a lot of publications on the principal side of the equation, and I think that people would find those valuable as well. You can always get us at our website, nasbe.org. Click on publications or use the search function and find everything and anything you need. Finally, our next webinar is later this week, March 6th. We will be reflecting on the most recent issue of our state education standard, which was called Demonstrating Skills of Value. The webinar is at 1 o'clock on March 6th Eastern Time, State Strategies for Implementing Skill-Based Assessments. We talk about durable skills and things that go beyond academics, and yet one of the real challenges in that space is how do we gauge working in teams or critical thinking or those kinds of things. You're going to hear a robust conversation on that topic if you join us on March 6th. With that, I just want to say thank you to our amazing panelists. Kudos to you. Great work. Keep up the great work that's happening in Delaware. And to the rest of you, thank you so much for choosing to be with us at this particular point in your day. Enjoy the rest of your day. And each and every one of you, keep up the great things you do in the interest of helping students to be successful and education systems to be excellent.